Lorie Tacket. On January 11, 1992, in rural Indiana, 4 teenage girls committed one of the most disturbing crimes in the state's history. Among them was 17-year-old Lorie Tacket, who would play a central role in what happened to 12-year-old Shanda Sharer that night. The brutal events that unfolded over several hours left investigators and the public struggling to comprehend how teenagers could torture someone they barely knew. The group lured Shanda away from her father's house in Jeffersonville under false pretenses. Melinda Loveless, who was 16 at the time, had orchestrated the attack out of jealousy because Shanda dated her ex-girlfriend Amanda Hine. Tacket provided the car and drove the girls to a remote spot known as the Witch's Castle. What happened at that dark location was slow and methodical. The teenagers bound Shanda and subjected the young girl to hours of physical abuse. Tacket actively joined in, taunting their victim with cruel words that would later echo in a courtroom. She told Shanda that the woods were filled with dead bodies and that hers would be next. Tacket had a dark and troubled past that would later emerge during her trial. She suffered from borderline personality disorder and experienced hallucinations since childhood. Meanwhile, her mother, a strict religious zealot, once tried to strangle her for changing her clothes at school. Tacket developed a deep obsession with the occult, sometimes claiming to be possessed by a vampire entity she called Deanna. In early 1991, Tacket was hospitalized after episodes of self-harm. She was prescribed antidepressants and discharged in April of that same year. By September, she had dropped out of high school entirely. When she met Melinda Loveless later that year, she found a friend who shared her inner darkness. Following the brutal assault at the castle, the girls locked Shanda in Tacket's trunk. They stopped by Tacket's house to wash up, then drove to an isolated field near Madison. Shanda was still breathing when they doused her with gasoline and lit the fire, returning later to add more fuel. The case was solved quickly when 2 accomplices, Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence, confessed to police that very night. Hunters discovered Shanda's burned remains, which investigators identified through dental records. Evidence recovered from Tacket's car trunk confirmed her role. All 4 girls pleaded guilty to escape a public trial and avoid the death penalty. Tacket admitted to murder, kidnapping, and arson. In 1993, she received a 60-year sentence at the state women's prison. Tacket was freed on January 11, 2018, the 26th anniversary of when they found Shanda's body. She had served 26 years and was let out early for good behavior. After completing a year of probation, she now keeps a low profile in Madison, Indiana. Shanda's mother, Jacques Volt, later reflected on the tragedy, saying, "If you don't let good things come from bad things, nothing gets better." This case remains one of the most heavily analyzed stories of extreme juvenile violence. Melinda Loveless, the mastermind behind the plot, later described the dark mindset that drove them that night. She admitted she eagerly anticipated what they were going to do to Shanda. Her chilling statement proved clear premeditation. This was no impulsive attack, but a crime Loveless had eagerly anticipated for days. The 4 girls received different sentences based on their specific roles in the crime. Tacket's 60-year sentence reflected her deep, active involvement throughout that horrific night. This tragedy has inspired numerous books and true crime documentaries, all trying to understand how children could commit such acts. Our next case involves a 30-minute standoff with police, starring a teenager named Nicole Jackson. In June 2021, in Volusia County, Florida, deputies responded to a break-in at a local home. What they found was far from typical. They walked straight into an armed standoff with 2 runaways who had barricaded themselves inside with stolen firearms. Nicole Jackson was only 14 years old at the time. She and a 12-year-old boy ran away from a group home, broke into the house, and uncovered an arsenal including an AK-47, a shotgun, and several handguns. When deputies arrived, the runaways refused to surrender. They opened fire. The shootout raged for over 30 minutes. Deputies scrambled for cover as rounds from the AK-47 peppered the area. Body cam footage captured Nicole's voice during the gunfight, laying bare her chilling mindset in that exact moment. "I am going to kill you all." That was what Nicole screamed at the deputies, who were desperately trying to end the standoff without bloodshed. Her words proved that despite her young age, she knew exactly what she was doing and wanted them dead. The road that led Nicole to that house remained mostly a mystery. Sent to a group home, her choice to run away pointed to a chaotic, unstable life behind the scenes. Her family background and the reasons for her placement remain hidden, largely left out of the public record. But one thing was certain. Once she got her hands on weapons, she was ready to shoot to kill. This was no sudden panic. The 30-minute gun battle showed she was fully committed to the fight. Showing immense restraint, the deputies ended the standoff without any loss of life. Nicole faced heavy charges, including attempted first-degree murder of police officers, armed burglary, and criminal mischief. The decision to try the teen as an adult showed the sheer gravity of her actions. Had her aim been true, officers would have gone home in body bags. Prosecutors argued that a teenage girl willing to wage a half-hour war against police belonged in adult court. The wheels of justice turned slowly in Florida over the next 2 years. In 2023, Nicole pleaded no contest to the charges. The plea deal accepted her guilt while avoiding a high-stakes trial that could have locked her away forever. Instead, she received 20 years in prison with credit for time served. As of 2025, she remains locked up in a Florida prison. While no deputies were physically injured, the deep trauma of dodging high-caliber rifle fire from a 14-year-old child will stay with those officers forever. This terrifying case left the public asking how a 14-year-old girl could gather such an arsenal and turn it on police. The safety net of the group home system had failed, driving her to run away and find trouble, setting off a chain of events that cost her decades of her youth. Our next case follows 2 young high school sweethearts with military dreams and a dark, murderous secret. Diane Michelle Zamora was born on January 21, 1978, in Crowley, Texas. An honors student at Crowley High, she dreamed of one day becoming a NASA astronaut. At just 14 years old, she met David Graham through the Civil Air Patrol, sparking a toxic romance that would destroy both of their futures in ways they never imagined. On December 4, 1995, 16-year-old Adrienne Jones was found dead near Joe Pool Lake. She had been beaten with a heavy weight and shot twice, once execution style. Detectives soon uncovered that the killers were actually 2 bright honor students with sparkling futures, and one was Diane Zamora, who was 18 years old and had just won admission to the United States Naval Academy, one of the nation's most elite military schools. Zamora and her fiancé, David Graham, had plotted the entire killing together. Graham, an aspiring military pilot, made a fatal mistake by confessing to Diane that he had slept with Adrienne. Instead of breaking up or dealing with the cheating, Diane demanded that Adrienne pay for it with her life. Their love was so toxic and obsessive that any outside threat had to be permanently removed. On the night of the crime, Graham lured Adrienne into his car, pretending they were going on a date. Diane lay waiting, hidden in the back seat. At the right moment, she lunged, striking Adrienne repeatedly with a heavy dumbbell. Then, she gave Graham the command that sealed their fates. "Kill her! Kill her!" Those were the merciless words Diane screamed at Graham as the bleeding girl lay helpless. Graham obeyed, shooting Adrienne twice with a 9mm handgun. One bullet was to the head, execution style. They left her body by the water and drove off, thinking their love was safe. Diane had first met Graham when she was just 14, joining the Civil Air Patrol. Both were top students who dreamed of military service. She wanted to explore space as an astronaut. He set his sights on becoming a pilot. Soon they were engaged, planning a future together. But behind their perfect public images lurked a toxic obsession that was ready to turn deadly. For months, the killing went unsolved, until Zamora made a shocking confession to her Naval Academy roommates. Those roommates went straight to the police, leading to the arrests of both Zamora and Graham in 1996. Soon, investigators gathered hard physical evidence linking the couple to the crime. They found blood inside Graham's car and a 9mm pistol hidden in his attic. Between the forensics and the secret confession, prosecutors had an incredibly tight case against the two. Their 1998 trial drew massive media attention. Two brilliant students destined for the military had committed a savage murder, driven entirely by jealousy. People were transfixed by the dark contrast between these clean-cut kids and their horrifying crime. After hearing how cold and calculated the ambush was, the jury convicted Zamora of capital murder. She was handed a life sentence with parole possible after 40 years. Graham received the exact same punishment. Two young people who once dreamed of serving their country had traded their bright military futures for decades in a cold prison cell, all because of an obsessive rage. In 2007, Zamora took a polygraph test during a Dateline interview. She failed key questions about her intent, though she later claimed the results were distorted by countermeasures. In the end, the interview offered nothing that could help her appeal. As of 2025, Zamora remains locked up at the Dr. Lane Murray unit in Gatesville, Texas, under protective custody. She won't be eligible for parole until around 2035, when she can finally plead her case for freedom. What drives someone to slowly poison the very person caring for them? Enter Christina Atkins. In 2006 in Michigan, 53-year-old Virginia Bentley developed strange health issues that baffled her family. She had no idea her 13-year-old granddaughter, Christina Atkins, who lived under her roof and depended on her, was causing all this pain. Christina had been spiking her grandmother's pills with morphine, keeping her weak while plotting a far more permanent end. It was a slow, deliberate poisoning campaign. She fed her doses that kept her sick without ending her life immediately. The cycle continued until Christina finally gave her grandmother one last fatal dose. Virginia Bentley died from a morphine overdose, and at first, nobody suspected her teenage granddaughter. Police eventually zeroed in on Christina after strange inconsistencies surrounding Virginia's death began to raise serious questions. Autopsy toxicology confirmed the presence of lethal levels of morphine. The drug was traced back to prescriptions in the house, leaving Christina as the only person with the perfect opportunity and access to execute the plot. Why she poisoned her grandmother remains a mystery to this day. The teen struggled with mental health issues and had reportedly suffered from past mistreatment. Family arguments also frequently broke out regarding her homeschool situation, but none of this explained why she chose to end her grandmother's life in such a slow, painful way. Because it was so calculated, prosecutors charged Christina as an adult. Her slow, systematic poisoning showed clear planning and full awareness of her actions. It was no sudden impulse, but a cold, calculated campaign that unfolded day after day. She finally faced a judge in 2008, at 16 years old. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, confessing to her grandmother's death. While this spared her family a painful trial, her sentence remained incredibly harsh. In court, a tearful Christina addressed the room, saying, "I really am sorry. I took someone I loved." Those were the words she used to express her supposed remorse. But whether her apology was truly genuine or just highly calculated left many in doubt. Virginia's grieving husband, the teen's step-grandfather, also spoke, sharing the absolute devastation of their shattered family. "You took her life," he said. "You took mine." His words laid bare how Virginia's death had destroyed far more than one life, ruining everyone she left behind. The state handed Christina a life sentence with parole possible after 20 years. By 2025, she was still serving time in a Michigan prison. Her chance at parole arrives in 2026, giving her the first opportunity to prove she has truly reformed behind those steel doors. The case left everyone wondering how someone so young could plan such a cold, heartless strike against the grandmother who was actively looking after her. Virginia Bentley had welcomed her granddaughter in, only for Christina to repay that kind shelter with the ultimate betrayal. This slow, agonizing poisoning showed a level of planning that completely ruined any claims of a sudden, impulsive mistake. Next, let's look at a young woman whose murder conviction was eventually thrown out, Charlie K. Ellerly. In April 2011, in Summerfield, Florida, 15-year-old Kath Jackson was tricked into visiting a home where a hostile crowd lay in wait. What followed was a coordinated ambush that left young Seth brutally beaten, shot, and his body burned in a desperate cover-up attempt. Among the arrested was 18-year-old Charlie K. Ellerly, whose exact role would spark fierce legal debates for many years. Several people participated in the attack, each carrying a different level of blame. The ringleader was Michael Bargo, who held a bitter grudge against Seth over a past romantic dispute. Other teens joined the physical assault and helped destroy the body to hide the crime. They claimed Charlie's job was tricking Seth into coming over, making her an accomplice to the ambush rather than an active killer. Police moved with urgent speed. Snitched on by her friends, Charlie was quickly swept up in the arrests and hit with a first-degree murder charge. While her hand in the crime was less direct, Charlie was dealing with heavy personal struggles long before that tragic night. She fought severe depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder, and had recently stopped taking all of her prescribed medications. These mental health struggles would soon become major points in her trial, sparking debates about her sanity and real guilt. In 2011, a jury convicted Charlie of first-degree murder, locking her away for life. The court treated her as if she were just as guilty as the actual killers, ignoring her lesser role. That heavy sentence stood for nearly 10 years until 2020 when her lawyers successfully fought to overturn it. The appeals judge ruled that her original lawyer had failed her completely during the first trial. Her new defense argued there was zero hard physical evidence pointing to Charlie's direct involvement, other than finger-pointing by co-conspirators who were trying to save themselves. They insisted she never lured the boy to his death, and simply being nearby did not make her a cold-blooded killer. Skipping the risk of a new trial, Charlie pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for a 10-year sentence. Backed by years of time served, she walked out a free woman, keeping a very quiet life in Florida. This tragic story shows us how different players in a single crime can end up with wildly different fates based solely on their lawyer and courtroom strategy. Charlie went from staring down a lifetime behind bars to stepping into the sunshine within a short span. Seth's grieving family had to relive the trial, survive the agonizing appeals, and watch a convicted accomplice get released early. Reopening Charlie's case offered zero closure to a family whose son was never coming home, robbing them of a final permanent verdict. Meanwhile, Michael Bargo, the violent ringleader of the ambush, remains on death row today. The stark contrast between his dark fate and her release proves how exact same crime can yield completely different endings for those involved. Next, you and I will look at a teenager who claimed self-defense after gunning down her mother's fiancé, Sunshine Grace James. In August 2023, inside a quiet Pensacola apartment, 15-year-old Sunshine Grace James pulled a gun and killed Christopher Moore while he slept next to her mother, Alexis Pineda. Her mother survived being shot, but the bloody events of that night would soon undergo intense, agonizing scrutiny in a court of law over the next 2 years. Sunshine immediately insisted she was only defending her own life. She told police that Moore had been abusing her, leaving her with no other way out. This desperate defense painted the shooting as a final, terrifying attempt by a child trying to escape a deadly threat. But the evidence pointed to something far different. Both Moore and Pineda were fast asleep when the gunfire erupted. Ambushing sleeping victims rarely fits the definition of self-defense, which requires facing an immediate, life-threatening danger in that exact moment. The prosecution argued Sunshine did not react to danger, she planned and executed a cold attack. Moments before pulling the trigger, Sunshine uttered words that would completely destroy her self-defense story. "Mama, I love y'all." Spoken right before she opened fire, this chilling statement showed premeditated intent, not a panicked survival reflex. Christopher Moore was only 35 years old when his life was cut short. He was engaged to Sunshine's mother, serving as a constant, major presence in their home for quite a while. Whatever dark conflicts brewed inside that house, Sunshine decided that murder was her only option. She fled the bloody scene but was quickly arrested by police. Investigators quickly gathered physical evidence, analyzing blood spatter and bullet wounds to piece together the crime. The forensic truth completely shattered her story of self-defense. For the next 2 years, the case slowly worked through Florida courts. In September 2025, Sunshine pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. The plea accepted legal guilt without admitting the state's exact timeline. She will face sentencing in January 2026. Her minimum sentence is 25 years, with life behind bars still on the table. Locked away in custody, she now awaits the hearing that will decide how many decades she has left. Her mother, Alexis Pineda, lived through the gunfire but lost her partner to her daughter's violence. The home they built before August 2023 was gone forever. No matter what drove Sunshine to grab that gun and pull the trigger. The public will be watching closely when she is sentenced in January 2026. The judge must balance her young age against the cold, planned nature of this attack and the fact that both victims were completely helpless when she opened fire. No matter the outcome, Sunshine will spend the prime of her life locked away for that horrific night in Pensacola. If you and I share a passion for exploring these dark mysteries, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. Our next case brings us to a quiet Nebraska town, where a secret pregnancy led to a horrific crime. This is the story of Chloe Copan Anderson. In November 2023, inside a dark Nebraska bedroom, 16-year-old Chloe Copan Anderson secretly gave birth. She had hidden her condition from the entire world, and when the labor began, she had absolutely no one. The horrific events that followed would lead to one of the harshest prison sentences handed to a Nebraska teenager in decades. Moments after delivery, Chloe took the life of her own newborn son. Using a sharp kitchen knife to commit the act, she desperately tried to conceal the evidence. But the cover-up failed. Her parents quickly made the gruesome discovery and called the police. Detectives soon uncovered the grim reality behind her pregnancy. At 15, Chloe had been impregnated by a 19-year-old man, triggering a separate criminal investigation under state law. This was not a mutual teen romance, but a situation the law classified as a serious exploitation of a minor. Terrified, Chloe hid her growing stomach, never seeing a doctor or confiding in a single soul. Crime scene investigators gathered forensic proof that perfectly matched her actions. Deep inside her bedroom closet, police found the knife, stained with undeniable trace evidence. The physical proof left zero doubt about the tragedy. But during court, a dark history of abuse began to surface. She had endured severe trauma at home, with absolutely no adults stepping up to protect her. This heavy trauma ultimately manifested as diagnosed PTSD and major depression. Her defense lawyers argued these mental scars broke her psychological state before and after the birth, with her attorney releasing a statement summarizing her grim reality. Not a single adult helped her. They argued she was utterly abandoned by her protectors, forced to navigate a terrifying and impossible ordeal completely on her own. Whether this horrific background justified or simply explained her crime was now up to the judge. In 2024, Chloe pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. This plea let her accept blame without a grueling trial dragging every dark detail of that night into the open. Now, the upcoming sentencing hearing would decide exactly how many years she would spend locked away. On April 24, 2025, she received 35 to 60 years in prison, meaning she will be at least 51 before she even tastes freedom again. A young teenager, completely failed by the adults in her life, was headed to a Nebraska prison for decades. It left a trail of painful questions about how we handle pregnant, traumatized teens facing desperate crises. Ultimately, Chloe made a choice that can never be undone. But the path leading to that moment was paved with systematic failures at every turn. Her newborn baby boy, denied any chance at life, became the ultimate victim of a tragedy that spun completely out of control. Meanwhile, the 19-year-old man responsible for her pregnancy faced separate charges under Nebraska state laws. This heartbreaking case exposed the cracks in several major systems: child welfare, healthcare, and the justice system, and every single one failed to help a desperate teenager before it was far too late. Next, we look at another young refugee struggling to survive in a new country, Sophia Coville. In May 2024, inside a Florida home, 14-year-old Sophia Coville brutally took her 79-year-old grandmother Yvonne's life in a shocking, direct assault. The young teen used a metal walker and a leather belt to inflict those fatal injuries. This tragedy exposed the silent struggles of a war-torn family and a traumatized child who fell straight through the safety net. Sophia and her relatives had fled Ukraine after the violent invasion shattered their entire world. The conflict ripped the girl away from her school, her friends, and everything she knew. Once in America, she found it nearly impossible to cope with her new reality. With her mother working overseas to send money home, Sophia was left mostly alone with her grandmother. Yevgenia was a strong cancer survivor who taught kindergarten back home in Ukraine. She dedicated her career to nurturing children, and in her final days, she was doing the same for her granddaughter. But their bond grew dangerously tense as Sophia's mental and behavioral struggles began to spiral. Her father, Vladimir, tried to get her psychiatric help, but the care was completely unaffordable. She exhibited clear signs of distress, sleeplessness, outbursts at school, and allegations of being severely bullied. When she claimed she was being harmed, her father brushed it off as attention-seeking drama. Whether these warnings were real or cries for help, they clearly showed a teenager in deep crisis. On May 23, 2024, Yvonnia took away the girl's phone. That simple argument quickly escalated into a deadly attack. Using whatever was nearby, a walker and a belt, Sophia struck her grandmother repeatedly. Yvonnia did not survive. The father's heart-wrenching response highlighted the devastating, impossible situation his family was trapped in. In a crushing victim impact statement, he described a profound grief that will haunt him forever. Yet, he made it clear he still loved his daughter and hoped she would one day find forgiveness. A devastated father lost his mother to his own child. In October 2024, Sophia pleaded no contest to manslaughter. The charge took her age and trauma into account, keeping her case out of adult prison and in the juvenile system. A judge sentenced Sophia to a high-risk juvenile program for 3 years, followed by supervision until age 21. The court prioritized actual rehabilitation over standard punishment. It recognized that Sophia was shaped by severe trauma and war as much as her own choices. By 2025, she remained locked in a Florida high-risk juvenile facility, proving how war's scars reach far beyond any physical battlefield. The family had fled one nightmare only to be completely destroyed by another. Yvonnia managed to survive cancer and a war, but she couldn't survive her own granddaughter's breakdown. It leaves us questioning the severe lack of mental health care for refugees and the hidden scars of war. Sophia desperately needed specialized help that her family couldn't afford, and the system failed to provide. An innocent grandmother paid the ultimate price for those failures, while her killer finally receives the critical therapy she needed from the start. Our next case brings us to another teenager who chose to strike back against her alleged abusers. Ashley Martinson. On March 7, 2015, in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, 17-year-old Ashley Martinson shot her stepfather, Thomas A's, and stabbed her mother, Jennifer A's. Both parents died from their wounds. Ashley then locked her younger siblings in a closet and fled the state. Today, we are looking at a case that forced the law to grapple with years of abuse and a sudden violent reaction. Ashley had endured years of severe abuse in her household. Thomas A's, her stepfather, had a history of serious crimes, including kidnapping. She claimed that both Thomas and her mother's former boyfriend had subjected her to physical and mental abuse over many years. According to Ashley, her mother, Jennifer, had completely failed to protect her. Things boiled over leading up to March 7th. Ashley was banned from seeing her boyfriend, and her household privileges were stripped away. This tense confrontation became her breaking point after years of alleged abuse. Ashley grabbed a shotgun and attacked Thomas first, shooting him in the head and neck. Next, she turned on her mother, stabbing Jennifer multiple times. There was proof of Ashley's dark state of mind. She had posted on social media, "I want to kill him so bad." This was a statement that prosecutors used to argue premeditation. The defense countered, arguing the post showed desperation from someone trapped in a nightmare, not a calculated plan. Ashley had been diagnosed with PTSD and depression stemming from the horrific abuse she described. Mental health experts who evaluated her found symptoms consistent with someone who had suffered prolonged trauma. The question became whether that deep trauma explained or excused her actions on March 7th. After the killings, Ashley fled to Indiana, where police caught her. At first, she claimed self-defense, but later admitted to her actions. Her story shifted as investigators kept pressing for details, finally admitting she had planned to end her own life, but decided Thomas deserved what happened far more than she deserved to die. Ashley pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree intentional homicide. The plea deal avoided a trial, sparing her young siblings from testifying about the horrors they heard that night. The court accepted her guilty plea and moved to sentencing. In 2016, Ashley was sentenced to 23 years in prison plus extended supervision. Appeals challenging her sentence were officially denied in 2019. As of 2025, Ashley remains incarcerated at Tacket Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. In interviews from behind bars, Ashley admitted she finally feels safe and happy for the first time ever. It is a statement that says as much about the environment she fled as the prison she lives in now. Behind bars, she has earned her high school diploma while continuing to serve her sentence. It forces us to weigh years of severe, prolonged abuse against the stark reality of two dead parents. Thomas Ayers, regardless of his criminal past, and Jennifer Ayers, despite her alleged failures as a mother, did not deserve to die. But the desperate circumstances that drove Ashley to violence didn't appear out of nowhere. How much does context matter when we judge a crime? There is no easy answer. Our next case involves identical twin sisters who turned on their own mother Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead. On January 13, 2010, in Conyers, Georgia, 34-year-old Nikki Whitehead was found dead inside the home she shared with her 16-year-old twin daughters, Jasmia and Tasmia. She had been brutally beaten and stabbed inside her bathroom. The twins claimed they stumbled upon their mother's body, playing the role of devastated, grieving daughters. It would take years before the horrific truth finally emerged. The Whitehead twins shared a deeply troubled history with their mother. Raised mainly by their great-grandmother Della Frazier, the girls were honor roll students and Girl Scouts. When Nikki won back custody just days before her murder, the twins fiercely protested. Moving back in with their mother ignited a wave of immediate conflict. Their relationship was marked by constant clashes over control and discipline, with the twins viewing Nikki as an overly strict, hypocritical parent. Violent clashes had erupted before, forcing the family into therapy and juvenile court proceedings. Tension was boiling over when the twins moved back in with Nikki. At first, detectives treated the sisters as witnesses rather than prime suspects. But the physical evidence told a different story, matching bite marks on Nikki's body to the twins. Meanwhile, DNA testing cleared Nikki's boyfriend, who had been an early suspect. The forensic trail pointed directly at Jasmia and Tasmia. For years, the twins claimed innocence while the investigation stayed open. Then in 2014, both sisters confessed to their roles in the murder, describing a bathroom confrontation that quickly escalated into a deadly assault. One twin beat Nikki with a heavy object while the other stabbed her. Together, they had worked to end their mother's life, with the confessions coming during plea negotiations. Ultimately, both Jasmia and Tasmia pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. The reduced charge acknowledged that the killing, though tragic, occurred in the heat of passion rather than through cold premeditation. The plea deal spared both twins from life sentences, resulting in 30 years in prison for each sister. They are held separately, with Tasmia at Arundel State Prison and Jasmia at Pulaski State Prison in Georgia. This separation ensures they cannot coordinate stories or influence each other's behavior behind bars. By June 2025, Tasmia's parole date was March 2026, and Jasmia's was September 2027. After more than 15 years locked away, the sisters may soon argue for their release. Nikki Whitehead's grieving family will finally have the chance to speak about the daughter and sister they lost. The Whitehead case became one of the most studied examples of sibling co-defendants in a family murder. The chilling dynamics between the twins, how they influenced each other, who held more guilt, and how they planned the crime raise questions that forensic psychologists still study today. Keeping them in separate prisons was designed to break the toxic bond that had led to their mother's tragic death. Our next case dates back decades, involving crimes so disturbing they completely changed how England handled juvenile offenders. Mary Bell. In 1968, in the Scotswood area of Newcastle upon Tyne, England, two young boys were found dead within months of each other. Young Martin Brown was only 4 when he was discovered in May. 3-year-old Brian Howe was found in July. Both had been strangled, and the investigation would soon focus on an 11-year-old girl named Mary Bell. Her actions shocked the entire nation, raising deep questions about criminal responsibility in young children. From her earliest days, Mary had experienced severe and horrific mistreatment. Her mother, Betty, was 17 when Mary was born, reportedly shouting, "Take the thing away," after giving birth. As a toddler, Mary survived several strange accidents that relatives suspected were attempts on her life, including being dropped from windows. Betty worked as a prostitute, reportedly allowing clients to harm Mary during her early years. The toxic environment she grew up in was defined by extreme poverty, neglect, and horrific abuse. Later, psychological evaluations identified severe psychopathic traits and developmental issues tied to both genetics and her abusive environment. Mary's understanding of fantasy versus reality was deeply broken by the trauma she had endured. Mary strangled Martin Brown on May 25, 1968, but his death was first ruled accidental. Then on July 31st, young Brian Howe was found dead with terrible injuries beyond strangulation, including puncture wounds and an M carved into his flesh. The rapid escalation suggested a killer testing boundaries and enjoying the results. Police focused their search on Mary and a 13-year-old accomplice, Norma Bell, who was unrelated to her. Clothing fibers eventually connected Mary directly to young Brian's death. Under questioning, Mary let slip details only the killer would know, and her final reaction was chilling. "That's all right by me," was Mary's cold response when informed of the charges against her. Her casual acceptance of being accused of taking 2 young lives showed a disturbing lack of concern that shook the veteran detectives on the case. Ultimately, Mary was convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. Her young age and mental state ruled out a murder conviction. Instead, she received indefinite detention, locked away until officials decided she was no longer a threat. Mary was released in 1980 at age 23, given a new identity to shield her from revenge. In 2003, a court order granted lifetime anonymity to her daughter and granddaughter as well. As of 25, Mary Bell's location is a legal secret, but in 1998, she gave interviews for the book Cries Unheard. She reflected on her actions, saying, "I didn't know I had intended for them to be dead forever." Those words highlighted the chilling disconnect of an 11-year-old taking 2 lives without realizing that death is permanent. The Mary Bell trial completely changed how the British justice system dealt with juvenile offenders. This shocking case proved that young children were capable of horrors once thought to be far beyond their own understanding, showing how a dark upbringing can set the stage for tragedy. Shielding her identity for life recognized both her terrible crimes and her potential to change over the years. But Martin Brown and Brian Howe were still mourned by their families long after Mary slipped into her new life. Those 2 innocent boys never got the chance to grow up or live their lives. Meanwhile, their killer got to start fresh under a false name. Our final case takes us to Tennessee, where the only woman on death row awaits execution, Christa Gail Pike. On January 12, 1995, in Knoxville, Tennessee, 18-year-old Christa Pike lured 19-year-old Colleen S.L. to a remote spot near a Job Corps site. What followed was one of the most brutal crimes the state had ever seen. It was a prolonged horror of torture, mutilation, and a stomach-churning souvenir taken from the victim. Christa grew up in neglect and chaos, raised by parents whose toxic marriages were broken by constant fighting. Her grandmother, the only person she felt ever truly loved her, passed away in 1988. Christa attempted suicide several times, beginning in elementary school, landing her in psychiatric wards and juvenile halls before she ever arrived at the Knoxville Job Corps Center. By then, she was obsessed with the occult and dating a fellow classmate named Tatel Ship. Jealousy sparked the plot. Christa was convinced Colleen wanted her boyfriend, Tatel. A petty teenage rivalry was about to morph into pure evil. Christa and her accomplices ambushed Colleen with a box cutter and a heavy meat cleaver. They carved a pentagram right into her chest, and while she was still breathing, they crushed her skull with heavy asphalt. The horrific assault didn't stop even after she was dead. Christa pocketed a piece of Colleen's skull as a trophy, eagerly showing it off to classmates back at the school. Police closed in fast once Christa started bragging. Her twisted pride in showing off that bone fragment led directly to her arrest. Blood evidence and her own shocking confession left absolutely no doubt about her guilt. Under interrogation, Christa tried to explain away the brutality. "We were just trying to scare her, and it got out of control," she claimed. But the extensive torture and mutilation told a completely different story. This was not an accident that simply got out of hand. It was cold, relentless cruelty. Christa was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to die. She became the youngest female sentenced to death in America's modern era of capital punishment. Meanwhile, her co-defendant, Taderil Ship, got life behind bars, while the other accomplice got a lighter sentence. For nearly 30 years, Christa has sat on death row, fighting endless appeals to spare her life. In 2023, her appeal regarding her young age was rejected. Judges have repeatedly upheld both her guilty verdict and her death sentence. In late 2025, Tennessee signed her execution warrant, setting the date for September 30th, 2026. If it happens, she will be the first woman executed by the state in over 200 years. Today, Christa waits inside the Deborah K. Johnson facility in Nashville, caught between one last miracle and the execution date she spent 30 years running from. Meanwhile, Colleen's family has waited 3 decades for justice to finally close the chapter that began when their daughter was stolen from them in 1995. The Pike case remains one of the most brutal crimes in Tennessee history. Calculated cruelty, prolonged torture, occult symbols, and keeping grim trophies pushed the crime into a category of severity that has kept Christa on death row for nearly 30 years. Other teenage offenders had their sentences reviewed under new standards, but Christa's case has successfully withstood every legal challenge. Colleen Sleur was just 19 years old when she died. She was barely an adult with her whole life ahead of her. Colleen went to meet people she trusted as friends, but walked straight into an unimaginable nightmare. Her final moments were filled with absolute terror and agony, while an attacker who claimed she meant no permanent harm carved a pentagram into her chest and crushed her skull with a heavy piece of asphalt. That brings us to the end of today's case. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another mysterious case.